Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Monday, the 16th of December. This is the Morning Blast with myself and Mr. Brown, who will be joining very, very shortly. And once he does, I'll get the legals out of the way because, as we know by now, he doesn't trust me to do them on my own.
Good morning, Ryan. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning. Let me just get the legals out the way for you, Squire. Nothing discussed on this Spaces session constitute trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ Global Limited, traders PIQ or PIQ Suite or its affiliates, including the hosts, which, as you know by now, is myself and Mr. Michael Brown. How the
Yes,
devil are
indeed.
you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, mate. Very well. How are you? Welcome back to Blighty after your week away.
Yeah, do you know what? Nothing prepared me for the 5-degree weather when I was in my shorts, to give you a clue. That was a bit of a howler there, not checking out. But yeah, no, it was all very good over in Malta, I have to say. Very enjoyed it.
Good.
I'll be going back for a longer stint in February, March time.
Oh, good. I'm sure everyone on the call will be very happy to hear
Wow.
that.
Moving on. What's happened?
Oh, right, indeed. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to what is the last full trading week of 2024. We have made it at last. Let's have a very quick look back at Friday and over the weekend. Friday was incredibly quiet in terms of data and news flow. It was also relatively choppy and ultimately quite directionless in terms of price action, particularly in the foreign exchange space, where we saw the dollar ending the day pretty much unchanged around the 107 figure, and most other G10s treading water as well. Although we did see the pound underperforming, down by around about 0.5% on Friday. And that, of course, came after the softer than expected October GDP data, which pointed to a monthly contraction in economic output for the second straight month. In terms of markets elsewhere, the S&P 500 closed unchanged, although the Nasdaq did end the day up by around 0.8%, closing at a fresh record high. The S&P, incidentally, last week closing down by around about 0.6% on the week, which was a first weekly decline in four. Meanwhile, in the Treasury complex, we also saw losses, with 10-year yields rising around 7 basis points on the day to a high of 4.4%. Seemingly no catalyst, although we did see some chunky selling across the Treasury curve over the duration of last week, actually. 30-year yields rose by about 30 basis points last week to a high just north of 4.6%, which has certainly caught the eye as we move into the FOMC meeting, which is, of course, coming up later on this week. That move higher in Treasury yields, slightly pressuring gold a little bit. The yellow metal starting to lose its shine a touch, down by about 1.2% on Friday to a low
Oh, I
of
missed that.
2000.
Sorry. I forgot to
Oh,
stop. I forgot to
oh,
tut. I was trying to do something else on my computer.
oh dear.
Fucking hell.
Multitasking is not your strong suit, is it?
No. I need to be focused. I need to be focused on picking up the puns. Sorry,
Oh,
everyone.
you really do. The gold trading down to a low of about $26.50 an ounce, and we did though see crude firm up about 2% on Friday, settling at its highest level since the 25th of November, and getting very very close to the 100-day moving average, which is lurking around $71.50 a barrel. We have not closed above that 100-day moving average since the start of October, so certainly one to keep an eye on. In terms of data and news flow on Friday, as I said, it was relatively quiet in terms of market moving developments. We did have further BOJ sources reports, this time from Kyodo, who noted that the BOJ is weighing skipping a rate hike at their next policy meeting, which is, of course, coming up on Thursday, and that policymakers want to confirm the trends in terms of inflation and earnings in the 2025 spring wage negotiations before tightening policy further. By my count, this is the sixth separate BOJ sources story that we have had over the last 7 days or so. I think the message is very, very clear at this point that the BOJ won't be doing anything at the December meeting. Incidentally, while we're talking of the BOJ, they've sent us all a lovely festive gift, Bank of Japan Governor Ueda will be speaking on Christmas Day to a very,
Oh, it's
very
like Father
influential,
Christmas.
well, indeed, to a very, very influential council of economists and economic advisors
Santa
in
Ueda.
Japan. It's kind of the Japanese version of Jackson Hole, is, I guess, the best way I can liken it to.
Oh, you're very
Um,
close to doing Jackson Hole in a Japanese accent then,
oh,
and
no, please don't.
I'm very glad I
Oh,
backed out of that one.
just don't do the eyes.
Ah,
Anyway, the BOJ have, and it just because it's the BOJ, they love to do things differently. They have actually used speeches on Christmas Day to announce policy pivots before.
of course they
Um,
have.
of
Of
course,
course they have.
I don't really need to tell you that liquidity is going to be incredibly thin, even thinner than my barnet on Christmas Day. So just one to bear in mind is that there could be a bit of a curveball coming out of Tokyo on Christmas morning.
Just
Anyway,
on that,
moving.
just on that, it's just an excuse for me to re-say my favorite my favorite phrase, if I
Even
can
if you
even
can
say
get it
that.
out.
Yeah, if I can get it out. Obviously, as we know by now, I think it's very clear that the central bank of central banks in general tend to do this, but more so the Bank of Japan completely missed the boat in their opportunity window
Mm.
to hike rates, and the whole hike when you must. No, sorry, hike when you can, cut when you must. Geez, I've balled that up. Hike when you can, cut when you must has been completely forgotten by the BOJ, and I think they've put themselves in a very, very dangerous position here because I think we'll see cuts before hikes now from them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised about that. I mean, the window for them to hike rates further is slamming shut if it hasn't slammed shut
Yeah, I think
completely
keep your fingers
already.
clear.
Indeed. Moving away from Japan and back into Europe, we did have a deluge of ECB speakers on Friday, 9 in total. They pretty much all said exactly the same thing, which was nothing of interest, and very much reiterating that the policy decision last week was a consensus around a 25 basis point move, that more cuts are coming next year. They're going to go step by step on easing, etc., etc., etc. President Lagarde has said exactly the same thing this morning. And we got plenty more ECB speakers on the calendar this week who will probably also all say exactly the same thing. Sticking in Europe, Emmanuel Macron has named a new prime minister in France, a chap called Bayrou, I suppose, is really what we're saying. The problem is he's going to face exactly the same issues that Macron faced.
Yeah,
This chap is apparently a centrist, but realistically, it's going to make no difference at all. And actually, one of the left wing parties has already put forward a censure motion, which is the French equivalent to a motion of no confidence. So back we go on that merry-go-round once more.
yeah.
As a reminder, and I've stolen this shamelessly from Helen Thomas at Blonde Money, who reiterated over the weekend that France cannot have legislative elections for, well, there has to be a 12-month gap. So we're talking about next summer. The only way to get around that is either the French legislature, they pass a constitutional amendment to get rid of that provision, or Macron himself resigns, and that triggers both a presidential and a parliamentary election following it. Neither of those look likely at the moment, so we're just going to continue with this kind of stasis and political rudderless nature of the French government, and of course the German government as well. And as a result of that, it was no surprise to see Moody's downgrading France in a surprise announcement
Yes.
after the market close on Friday. For those who track these sort of things, France is now rated at AA3, albeit with a stable outlook. Last but by no means least, moving over to the United States, TikTok, they are trying to fight the fact that they are going to be shut down in the United States from mid-January, and one of the US courts denied their bid to pause that ban from coming into effect. That happened on Friday. And also, last but by no means least, the Nasdaq 100 is going to have a bit of a rebalance. A couple of notable names joining the index, including Palantir and MicroStrategy. Of course, MicroStrategy is not really a business at this point. Their business is basically to issue convertible notes and then use those notes to buy Bitcoin and then issue more debt to buy more Bitcoin. But nonetheless, they are now in the Nasdaq 100.
On that
And
as well,
oh, go
um,
on.
there's that whole like sailor tracker kind of tweet thing that goes out all the time. And Sailor said yesterday, oh, it looks like, and they put a green dot on the chart every time he buys a bulk load of block
Mm.
trade. I guess he does them or however. Um, and he put a tweet out yesterday saying, "Oh, it looks like they're missing a green dot." And the last time we did that, we then got told that he bought some more. So expect an announcement on that if it's not already happened overnight whilst I was sleeping.
Well, there you
Yeah.
go.
Just on that as
The
well, just quickly on that. One
Go
thing
on.
to note is obviously it trades at a multiple to Bitcoin, basically, right? The
Yes.
stock does. Um, the I You can kind of make an argument for why that would be the case a few years back, or when he first started doing this, because it was harder for real money, institutional money, regulated
Mm.
money to get into Bitcoin.
Just
It's
buy an
now
ETF now.
increasingly it's now increasingly easier or very easy for regulated money to buy Bitcoin straight off the bat. So
Yes.
I don't personally see where this multiple is coming from, and I don't think if someone's brainier than me can work it out. But if you wanted to do anything, I'd suggest not that anything's a trading advice on here, but it feels like selling MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin might be a decent spread.
Yes. The other thing that, well, the one thing I was going to say in terms of MicroStrategy is because they are now in the Nasdaq, it does mean that a lot of people are going to be forced to buy them
Yes,
in
of
terms
course.
of passive tracker funds and all the rest of it, which is obviously
Yeah,
something worth bearing in mind. Um,
that's called exit liquidity.
well, yeah, quite. And that's pretty much it from me in terms of Friday and over the weekend.
Well, thank you very much. Let me get through some headlines via our dear friend Zach. Hello, Zach. I can see you there. There's quite a
Good
few today,
morning, Zach.
actually. Let me just quickly remind myself to get rid of the Moody's bit because you've done that. So starting off in macro land, Wall Street Journo's Nick Timireros, I always butcher that name, so apologies, says investors are widely expected a third in the row rate cuts this week. Officials are ready to, and he's also noted that officials are ready to slow or even stop lowering rates after that. So basically, that will be the Fed whisperer giving us confirmation of what we already knew. I do think that this whole stop, or even I do think this whole stop cutting after this one is more likely than anything
Mm.
else. I think it's going to be that's everything on the language. Oh, remind me, is there dot plots? Oh, there is, isn't there? Yeah, 'cause you
Well,
told us
there
on Friday.
is, and obviously we'll talk more about this, but well, on Wednesday. The problem with the dots is that they're going to be conditioned on a set of economic assumptions based on fiscal
Yeah.
policy as it is now, and not as
Yes.
it will be,
Under
when Trump
Trump.
comes into office. So
And and as I always say, the dot plots are there to be moved. It's not like when they put them there that they should be there in a year's time. So
no,
I think
but
maybe
people
a little bit.
people always go a bit dossy over it anyway. But
Oh God. Moving on. Trump allies are worried that his shift in rhetoric from the president-elect could portend, to a watered-down deportation effort, and are urging him to scale back his plans. I think I've seen quite a bit on this, just anecdotally, mainly from like the heartland America farm, the Corn Belt, where the farmers and whatnot and agricultural players are kind of saying, look, if you did remove all the migrants, no one's going to be making picking your food.
mm,
So that's one to watch. Certainly something that's come up a few times on the Ags Blast that I do with Angie during the day, 15 minutes before the New York Open. Anyway, slumping office property values are rippling through US banks, with smaller lenders in particular ramping up the use of loan modifications, in their commercial real estate books. This whole CRE implosion that's been on the cards for a while, I think we're getting closer and closer to that being realized, and I do think it is quite a significant thing to keep an eye on. Bank strategists expect the continued flow of option selling to generally keep a lid on volatility in 2025, with JP Morgan seeing the CBOE volatility index averaging around 16 for the year compared to around 15.5 across this year, 2004. Moving over to China, China's State Bureau said that after the data, that the trend of recovery in consumption has not changed, saying that policies will be implemented to expand domestic demand, said it's necessary to stabilize employment, increase income to boost consumption capacity. Once again, that's a lot of fart. We rarely see much poo coming out of this.
I was going to
So
say if anyone can translate that, that would be much
yeah,
appreciated.
it's like we all know they're great with words, but it feels like very little actually gets done. But we'll see, we'll see. China has room to further cut the the reserve requirement ratio, with the average RRR now at RRR, now at six
Jeez.
point six percent, according to a central bank official. I think we all know that the triple R is going to get cut. It's just a matter of when, or maybe a Christmas Day treat like the Bank of Japan. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Faced with rising social frustrations and public unrest, China's leaders are now ramping up security measures and squelching, I quote, squelching discordant views on the country's economic health. So basically, if you tweet about China's economy being a bit shit, you're in the gulag, I think. Moving over to Germany.
Well, that's you and I fucked then, isn't
Well, yeah, I know. Well, hopefully,
it?
oh, yeah. Well, I love the Chinese. Have I ever mentioned that? I think they're all brilliant. German leader Olaf Scholz is expected to lose confidence vote in Parliament on Monday. So he joins remember the Germans are with the French in terms of complete political upheaval. A defeat. The Social Democratic Chancellor is counting on to trigger early elections after calling an end to his freeway coalition last week. Do not make a freeway joke, Ryan. You're better than that. Um, Lagarde said that more, speaking of freeways, Lagarde said that more rates are to come and the direction of travel was clear. This was just as she was coming to the wires just now. Um, Literally, as Michael Brown started talking, she hit the wires, I believe.
And
ECB's
who would you rather listen to, her or me? Don't answer
you,
that.
of course, you. It's non-deniable. It's always you.
Good man.
Everything is about you. ECB's Kazakh said the ECB should lower interest rates further, but probably won't need to take them to levels that would stimulate economic expansion. Okay, thanks for that, matey. The the yeah, we'll cut them, but we don't actually want them to have an impact on growth.
Yeah,
Nice one. The
morons.
EU fears divisions between member states will hamper its ability to combat a potential flood of cheap goods from China dumped by Beijing in response to a prospect of higher tariffs from the US. Basically, the EU is fearing here that because the governments of the EU aren't even talking to each other at the moment because they don't have governments, that there's going to be no response to Chinese tariffs. Sorry, Chinese flooding of goods, which you can kind of imagine. Which, to be honest, I have mentioned with Helen Thomas a few times that it feels like this could be the one time that the EU nations actually need to get their act together politically to have a kind of a solid front,
Mm.
and they're in absolute shambles. Um, EU nations on Monday will discuss preparations for winter with the gas transit agreement between Russia and Ukraine set to expire and the bloc trying to phase out reliance on fossil fuels from Moscow. So that'll be one to watch. I know obviously we have seen a massive amount of LNG capacity come online throughout the world. So that's easy, well, hopefully easier now to ship over to Europe. Manufacturers' confidence, sorry, in the UK economy fell after Rachel Reeves's tax raising budget at the sharpest rate since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. Another setback for the Chancellor. I think we all saw that coming. UK Chancellor Reeves will not hold an emergency tax raising budget next spring in the event of low growth or other setbacks blow to her fiscal plans. The
But
Treasury has insisted this.
how can we decide now whether or not we're going to have an
Well,
emergency budget in 9 months' time? It's not.
well,
You don't sort of foresee an emergency that
Well,
far out, do
yes,
you?
exactly. You don't tie your hands behind the back, but what they're insisting is they're pointing to a spending squeeze if action was needed. But I think that I'd be interested to see the exact wording on this because if they say Chancellor Reeves will not hold an emergency tax raising budget, that's not to say that someone else might not hold a tax raising budget. And
Chancellor
I'm not just
Diane
saying
Abbott
I'm
or
not just
something.
saying well, God, oh, don't the horror. But no, but genuinely, the language definitely makes a difference, and it is an important difference
No,
because
that is very true.
we've already seen Labour, roll back on their no tax rises because of some very finely worded details in their manifesto.
That's a very good
Um,
point.
so, like, I would definitely, if anyone wants to go out and find out the exact word in this, if it specifically mentions Chancellor Reeves
Mm.
will not hold an emergency tax raising budget. That does leave the door open for a tax raising budget. That's as simple as that. Just quickly sticking with the UK before moving on to geopolitics. The London Stock Exchange is on course for its worst year of departures since the financial crisis, as fears mount that more FTSE 100 businesses will quit the UK in favour of New York. I think this is an ongoing problem. I believe, is it 88 have left this year so far?
Yes, it is
Something
something
like
like
that.
that, and
Oh, bosh.
some shameless self promotion. This is something that myself and the great man Michael Hewson discussed in our latest podcast last week.
I'll repost that again for you in a minute. There you go.
Thank you.
I do think this is a combination of things. I think the FCA are at fault. I think the government
Mm.
are at fault. I think the LSEG are at fault. I think LSEG could
Yeah,
be more at fault than anyone. But we have spoken about this many
it
times.
becomes self
Um,
fulfilling as well. That's the problem because now,
yes.
if one of the big problems is liquidity, everyone says that London is a relatively illiquid market compared to the US, for example. If you have a load more companies leaving, that's only going to make liquidity even
Yeah.
worse, and it becomes self perpetuating. But like you say,
Yeah.
we could talk
Exactly.
about that forever.
Well, this is the thing, and also just quickly on this though, finally on this, I'm struggling to find a way where this is turned around in the short term.
I don't think it will be.
Yeah, same. So yeah, we're really positive on the UK over here. UK PLC, yeah, love it. Anyway, moving into geopolitics, Iranian crude. Because I do apologise, there are a lot of headlines today. Geopolitics: Iranian crude exports to China have been disrupted by broader US sanctions on tankers, according to Vortexa, squeezing oil flows to the OPEC producers' most important customer. Sticking with oil, we've got Libya's NOC declared a state of emergency and a force majeure at the Zawiya refinery after clashes between the armed groups caused a fire. Another day, another force majeure from the Libyans. Spot rates for hauling crude oil on the largest vessels from the Middle East to China, one of the benchmark routes or the benchmark route, have sunk by a third this year as demand in the top importer slows and OPEC delays the restart of idled supply. Now, the old phrase of follow the money. In this kind of instance, follow the crude, and the crude ain't getting shipped as much. So that's one to watch from the demand side. Bashir al-Assad's central bank airlifted around 250 million in cash to Moscow in a 2-year period when the then Syrian dictator was indebted to the Kremlin for military support, and his relatives were secretly buying assets in Russia.
Mm.
That's according to the FT. Hezbollah lost its most important supply route from Iran through Syria. That's according to their current leader. The first time the chief of the Lebanese militia has publicly acknowledged that the fall of Bashir's regime has hurt the group's ability to rearm after a punishing Israeli campaign. Now, a few equity headlines. You've already said about MicroStrategy and Did you mention Palantir
I
have
did
also
indeed,
been added?
yes.
Cool. Does anyone know what they do? Answers on a postcard, please.
Some sort
Feel
of
free.
data stuff.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, cheers, mate. Super microcomputer has tapped Evercore to raise debt and equity. Now, like, we already know that this absolutely, it's like super microcomputer already stinks to high heaven.
Mm.
Um, Evercore, they're not up there on my most trusted of people to use, but
No.
fair play to them. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Meta has urged the California Attorney General to stop OpenAI from becoming a for-profit company. Apple is preparing a series of major design and format changes to its lineup of iPhones, including thinner and foldable models and potentially other products in a bid to revive growth. So potentially, we'll see a product launch that isn't just the old products in different colours. That'd be nice.
Yes.
Got a few headlines for Tesla here. Tesla raised the price of its Model S cars in the United States by $5,000. The Model S based variant all-wheel drive will now cost $79,990, while the performance I don't know, variant will cost $94,990. Tesla has vowed to press on with its fight to restore Elon Musk's historic pay package, and failure could have a high cost, potential for more than 100 billion in tax and accounting charges for the company and its chief executive. Ouch. US Treasury has informed Japan's Nippon Steel that the panel reviewing its proposed 14.9 billion purchase of US steel has not yet come to an agreement on how to address security concerns. I can see this dragging through until the Trump's administration now, because we're getting into Christmas, and we all know lawyers and that love Christmas off. Volkswagen's stalemate with Labour leaders looks increasingly likely to drag into 2025, denying the CEO's fresh start. He's been seeking to turn around Europe's biggest car maker. More bad news for Germany, that. The UK government has agreed to compensate BP and Equinor over their 8 billion gas-fired power station and carbon capture project if much of the scheme is blocked in court by an environmental campaigner. This is just ridiculous. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm not sure about you, but this is, we're basically letting it's carbon capture project as well. So it's got some green energy credentials in there, and the £8 billion
Mm.
project is in harm's way because of a couple of campaigners. I'm all for environmental campaigner. I'm a country boy at heart, but when this starts happening, the government have to
Yeah,
pay the
no, I
expense
agree.
bill. It's a bit weird. Anyway, and just finally, some headlines that have come through since we've been talking, and they involve French and German being in the shit. So I'm going to read them out. French service sector contraction continues in December. France's service sector shrank further in December, although the pace of contraction eased. That's one to keep an eye on. Obviously, they're in deep murdy. Pessimism prevails among German firms for 2025. Survey shows German companies feel pessimistic about the new year, with only 12.6% expecting business conditions to improve in 2025. That's a horrific number. And that's out of 8,000 firms surveyed by the IFO. And we've also had some German PMI data. Well, we're getting PMI data from everywhere today. German PMI data today, unless you were going to cover this, Michael, but it
No,
has
I
only just
wasn't.
come out. Okay, so Germany's economic downturn eased slightly in December, but business activity still contracted for a 6 month running. Activity index for Germany's service sector rose to 51 in December from a 49.3 in November, so at least a bit of contraction there. From the PMI, who is it? I can't remember who does the PMI now.
IHS
Um,
Market. No,
no,
S&P
no, no,
Global.
German one's the HCOB, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, bosh. They've quoted saying this improvement in services is good counterbalance to the quicker decline in manufacturing output, giving some hope that GDP might not have shrunk in the last quarter of the year. Just for your guide, the manufacturing index worsened slightly, falling to 42.5 from 43 previous. Obviously, that is
Mm.
just horrific. And finally, we did have Lagarde just come out before Michael went on air, saying that even though we're not there yet, we are close to achieving our targets. Dropped the restrictive bias in future policy orientation. She also said confidence that we are seeing a timely return to target has increased, and certainty around inflation projections has decreased significantly. Now, greater alignment between our forecast and underlying inflation. And that's pretty much the key ones that I read.
Indeed. Right.
Oh, how
Oh
finally, she
my
did mention
God.
about sorry. She did mention about the US. So it's worth flagging that one. She says if the US does take a protectionist turn, they will. Actually, that's my bit added, not hers. Growth in in the euro area is likely to take a hit. Yeah, thanks for stating the obvious. And finally, over to you. I don't think I've ever said that much. Sorry,
No, I
everyone.
don't think you have. Because Ryan's spoken so much, I've now got 3 minutes to go through what is probably going to be the busiest week of the year in terms of macro events.
Ah, you should have
Um,
pre-warned me.
it's fine. I will go through things relatively quickly. As Ryan alluded to, we do have a whole host of PMI figures out today. Eurozone data due in 4 minutes, and then UK figures due at 9:30. The rest of the week, it's a busy one here in the UK. We've got jobs data on Tuesday, inflation figures on Wednesday, and retail sales figures on Friday. Of course, in the mix as well, we have a Bank of England policy decision on Thursday, where the MPC should vote 8-1 in favour of keeping bank rates steady at 4.75%. Also, in terms of policy decisions this week, we obviously hear from the Fed on Wednesday with a 25 basis point cut expected, along with language building in additional optionality, providing the flexibility to skip the January meeting if policymakers desire. Well, this week also sees decisions due from the Bank of Japan, the Riksbank over in Sweden, and the Norges Bank in Norway. And then in terms of other notable economic releases, of course, there are quite a few. We have both the IFO and ZEW sentiment surveys from Germany. We have retail sales, industrial production, and the core PCE price index all out of the United States. We also, this week from the States, have the final read of third quarter GDP as well. And we also get inflation figures this week from Canada, and a final print from the Eurozone for November. Of course, this is also the final proper trading week of the year, as we've both discussed at quite some length. I think most people have probably done and dusted for the year already, although those who aren't will almost certainly be using the FOMC on Wednesday evening London time as the last sort of major event of the year, after which things are likely to thin out and become relatively quiet in pretty short order. So do bear that in mind if you are trading this week. Things could get pretty choppy and volatile as people do close out their positions and as market activity dries up towards the back end of the week. And that is pretty much it for this morning.
Well, thank you very much. I'll take the nudge in the ribs, and I won't put too much on that long in future. Um, right, sincere condolences, everybody. Right, I will see you tomorrow.
Indeed. See you then.
See you
Bye
later.
bye.
Bye bye.